Hey guys, in this video I want to give you a tour of our drum set here at the church, talking about how we get the drum sounds that we're getting in the room and on our live stream. It's going to be broken down into 3 sections, so if you're interested in one more than the other, you can look at the timestamps below. We're going to be talking about the source sounds, what this kit is made up of, how we get good tone at the source. Then we're going to talk about capturing that source, miking techniques, and then finally the processing of those drum sounds back at our soundboard and live stream mix. So let's dive into it. The drum set that we're using is a DW Collector Series maple kit. It's made up of a 12-inch, 14-inch, and 16-inch toms. And then for the cymbals, we actually are using the Heartbeat custom dry line for the most part. We have 15-inch hi-hats, 2 of the 20-inch custom dry crashes, a 22-inch crash, and then for the ride we're using actually a Heartbeat Epic 24-inch. And we just love these cymbals because they are really washy and they don't get too loud too quickly. They decay pretty quickly. And in our room, we are not caged. We don't have any cage. It's not that giant of a room. We seat about 400 people in here, but the room is pretty dead, and so we can kind of get away with it. Our players play well, but these cymbals helped us a lot. We were using Paragon cymbals that were very in your face. These have helped the mix a lot and sit a lot better in the mix. And so I'm going to let my dad talk to you a little bit more about the actual capturing of the tones and getting the drums themselves to sound good, because we have a great kit, but if you don't know how to make them sound their best, you know, you're kind of fighting an uphill battle already. So Dad, take it away.
Okay, so hi, I'm Fred Russell. I'm Ryland's dad, and I've been playing drums for, I guess, about 40 years in church, and which dates me quite a bit, but I have a real passion for trying to make things sound good, and so I appreciate the chance to tell you a little bit about our kit. I think that I've been tuning drums for a long time, and most of the time it's always been by ear. And we had some new technology things which jumped up and I really liked, and I started out using a drum dial to try to adjust things. And but more recently, we switched over to a TuneBot, and the TuneBot is a huge help because of the consistency I'm able to get when it comes to each individual drums and how we continue to get them tuned and then get them retuned very quickly. So I highly endorse that. It's real easy to use, something you can put on your drum and just do a quick tune before you get ready to do the service. It doesn't take much time to do that, and you get consistency that way. So again, TuneBot's my choice for sure. So for me, the biggest, most important thing of the kit for me as a drummer, and that's the snare. And part of what happened is that we were trying to find the right snare drum sound. I personally, being old school, you know, I could probably love on John Bottom for the rest of my life. Love that sound, but unfortunately it really doesn't fit very well with worship music. And we wanted to have much deeper snare, much, you know, with a lot more power. And so what I ended up doing to find a cheap alternative was to go out and find a Ludwig snare. And this is a Black Magic snare. It is not a Black Beauty. Black Beauties are going to cost you between, as most of you drummers know, $1,000 to $1,200, although they're super popular. But the Black Magic is a step back. This is a 14x8 deep, and I wanted that deep shell, and I also wanted the brass sound. Main difference in this drum is it is a welded shell instead of actually having a one-piece shell like most of the expensive brass drums are. And it also has tube lugs, my personal preference as well. But this is a $350 drum, and it's made very, very well. It sounds great. It's not going to last me forever, but you know, 10 or 15 years, it'll be a great drum. So that's the primary thing I tried to use. I also tried a lot of different sounds, and in using the TuneBot, the sounds that I think fit best are a really tight tuning on the bottom snare and a really deep tuning on the top snare. Now that equates to, in a TuneBot tuning, of 385 on the bottom, and which is really tight, and loose tuning on the top of 190. Now that's borderline about when it comes to playability if you're talking about playing snare and playing a lot of beats. We were doing White Flag last week, and I was kind of struggling a little bit with having enough rebound. But it gives you an absolutely deep, cannon-like sound. And this particular drum is still in the configuration it came out of the box with the Ludwig head, which is equivalent to an Emperor head, and a clear head on bottoms. Again, it's just factory stock. I haven't changed it out since we got this drum probably 6 months ago. And I like the thinner head simply because you can buy double ply heads and they're going to actually give you a little bit more controllability. But I'd rather just detune and also use deadening when it comes to just any kind of thing you want to use. I'm using some Evans. I forget the name of these things.
They're not moon gels?
Well, they're not moon gels. They've got a new fancy name for them. But I like them because once they get a little dirty, you can take them off, clean them, and put them right back on, and they work great still. So their reusability is great. Where moon gels get dirty, you might as well throw them in the trash. So, but I have those on each one of these particular drums. But this particular drum is different than the other drums. Now, my inspiration for going to the tunings we did when it came to these toms was that playability factor. And the top tunings are pretty normal when it comes to how they would sound normally, but the bottom heads are again tuned very tight. And I got this as an inspiration from Rich Redmond, who came and did a master class at one of the drum shops here in Tulsa. And that's how he tunes his drums. He's played on 20 #1 albums. Even though he's a country drummer, he absolutely knows what to do in the studio. And I was really shocked at the result that we were able to get when it came to that. So, and then by the way we mic and the way we EQ everything, all these things kind of come together. So,
talk about what heads you're using on the toms.
Yeah, the heads we're using, I think these are my personal favorites. They're Evans UV1s. There's an Evans UV2 that I'm not a fan of, and the reason for that is these heads are still staying in tune after having them on the drums for, I don't know, maybe a year now. And for me, I love that fact of it. They're probably some of the most durable heads that I've ever seen that still maintain their tonality and don't get stretched out really bad. So I'm a big fan of the Evans UV1s. I'm also a Remo guy, but Remos take so long to get locked into their sound, and you put an Evans head on and it's going to instantly be, it's going to sound right. So that's why we're using Evans heads for the toms, because it's much easier to deal with, and they last a long time. So that's the primary reason I like the Evans heads. So
what kind of sticks do you use?
I personally like the Todd Zuckerman personal stick. I've used those for quite a while now. The drum shop actually has a knockoff version of that, which I use, which is the least expensive alternative. But yeah, I like that particular stick.
So those are wood tip, like 5A, 5B?
They're no tip. They're just solid piece. They're just a wood. They're a wood stick, and with a little bit smaller acorn end on it for me, and so I can kind of play hard or I can play soft either way, and they seem to work really well, and they're a little bit bigger stick too, which I like that. Okay, and as far as the kick goes too, I only mention that we use a very deep tuning as far as the non-batter side of the head. The batter side of the head has a pretty tight tuning for feel primarily and for attack. And I think that's also listed on the TuneBot settings. I used to for years try to get even more depth, and by tuning it really loose, but the beater doesn't want to come off the head whenever you play that loosely. So I like it a little tighter. And but this Aquarian Super Kick has been great. We've had it on there for quite a long time. It works really, really well. Yeah, and the pedals I use, I used to use DW 5000s for a long time. They got stolen out of church one time, so my alternative ended up being these Pearl Eliminators, which are definitely my personal favorites. They have the best feel. I seldom played any double stroke stuff, but I've always used double kick just out of habit, and to have it as an extra voice when it comes to the drum set. And for my personal taste and for price too, I think we spent probably a third as much money as I did on the DW stuff. So works great, and I've never had any problems with any of them.
Okay, let's talk about miking the drums. Super important, lots of ways to go about it. This is the way we're doing it currently. We always are changing things though. Starting with the snare, we are miking the top and the bottom with Shure 57s, classic, hard to go wrong with those. On the toms, we're using just some old Audix mics that my dad had, some D series mics, so the D1, the D2, and then I had this old Audix F14 for the low tom. That's actually like a kick mic that we're using on it. Sounds great, gets a little more of that punch in the bottom, big tom there. On our kick drum, we are not double miking it. We are actually just using a Shure Beta 52. We tried a bunch of different mics. And I've tried also these Roland triggers on snare and kick feeding into our Roland SPD SX to kind of blend in some triggered sounds. Haven't found the sweet spot for that yet though, and I'm pretty happy with our drum sounds without it. So, we're not doing any gating with triggers. I'll talk about all those settings of how we're getting that accomplished at the soundboard. But for overhead mics, we don't actually mic overhead just because I don't really love the look of that. And for in the room, we don't need a ton of cymbals, but we've got two of the Audio-Technica Pro 37Rs. I think they're about $150 mic. And they're just kind of pointing here at the kit on each side to get that stereo image. And so those are just capturing mainly the cymbals and a little bit of the kit image. And we're liking it. We could go to under miking every cymbal and all that, but for us, that's okay. Let me move over here to this sample pad. I love it, the Roland sample pad, SPD SX. We use it just to get some extra sounds, some big sub kicks, some 808 sounds, some shaker, tambourine hits, that kind of thing. A lot of people are doing it, and we've enjoyed using it as well. Now that we've captured all the sounds, let's move to the soundboard now, and I'll show you how we're processing those sounds to make them sound the best that they can. So we use the M32 still to process everything for in-house and online. A quick breakdown of how we have our stream mix set up is that we are routing the drums as a pre-fader stereo aux, and then mixing that with a post-fader submix of everything else that comes into a matrix. So I'm going to be recording what I'm hearing in my headphones so I can show you things without EQ, before processing, and the effects of that. So let's dive into it. So we're going to start with the kick drum. Here's the EQ that you can see. Here it is before EQ. That's just that Beta 52. Now we bring the low cut and the EQ. Okay. So other things that we have going on there is we have gate and compression, just a light gate. And there's our compression that's pretty aggressive, honestly, for that kick. We don't have any inside mic, so kind of helping a little bit more attack that I'll go through some effects processing we're doing to get a little more attack out of that as well. So now let's dive into the snare. If I go back to our EQ, and here it is before EQ. Let me solo that first. This is just the top mic. And here comes the EQ. Okay, and then we've got no gate. Here's our compressor on that. Just taking off about 3 dB, adding it back in right there. Pretty aggressive ratio, honestly, 5:1. Okay. Let's look at our tom EQs, tom 1, tom 2, tom 3. Then we have hi-hat, ride, snare bottom. So what you're going to hear first is the drums being soloed with just the channel strip processing, but not any effects or anything that's happening on the stream mix. So this is how that sounds. And I'm gonna upload the scene file for our settings for all of the EQs, compressions, and all that stuff for the M32, X32 in the description. You can download that below, and so that way I don't have to dive into like the crazy minutia of it all. So once again, here are the drums with just channel strip adjustments. Now let's solo out our stream mix. So you can see that the processing we're doing there is making a big difference. The main things we're doing is we're adding stereo imaging to that stream mix. We are adding reverb in the house and on the stream mix. And we're doing some effects with, what's it called? The Wave Designer. So let me A/B some of those things so you can kind of hear how that affects the sounds. So I'm going to solo out just the snare and kick. So this is helping the snare and kick. There's our settings for the Wave Designer. Now I'm going to turn down the effects. No reverb, reverb. And then to achieve our panning, if we go into the sends, you can see here that we are panning between 9 and 10 with the different toms, just lightly, and then our hi-hat and our ride as well, just to give that stereo image of the drum set just a little bit more life in the stream mix. Now we're mono house, so it doesn't really affect our house mix, but that's okay. That's what we had to deal with. Well, there you go, guys. If you have any questions about our set or the techniques we're using, feel free to drop them in the comments. Let me know any tips that you have. And you know, something we used to do before we went live acoustic drums is we were doing separate sampling for our electronic kit. And if that's something that might be interesting to you and you use an electronic kit at your church, let me know. Maybe I can make a video about that with our Alesis set that we have in the venue. So remember, guys, we can do a lot of great things. Let's do it all for God's glory. We'll see you in the next one.